If one more person tells me I can die, I'm gonna beat somebody. I'm just saying. Hi friends, it is time for another story time, and today I'm going to be talking about the ongoing time of my health. Let's just get started. This is going to be fun. So in the past few videos, mainly gaming videos, if you notice I'll complain about pain in my wrist or talk about a surgery I had. It's because about a month ago, I had a lump removed from my wrist that was atypical, asymptomatic, something like that, a something. But either way, it was getting dangerously close to being, the big C word. The big C word that's been a big C word for more than a couple of years. Not the
coronavirus! Coronavirus!
Thank you, baby. But, the cancers. So, yeah, if you see, it's healing up pretty nicely, but that was what's going on. However, I had 2 other lumps on me that I was like, if that was bad enough to be removed, we should probably check the other 2, right? And the doctor was like, yeah, we'll definitely do that. So, I got them checked. They took biopsies of both of them. One of them came out fine, the other one needs to also be removed, which is, yay, fun times. However, the one that needs to be removed, for whatever reason, got infected. So, main issue is that when they did the biopsy, and even when they did the surgery, they didn't give me anything to treat it. They were just like, slap some Vaseline on it, rebandage it, and call it a day. So, I got a biopsy here first, before the surgery, and so I was treating the two biopsies the way I treated this one. One came out okay, the other one somehow got infected. I don't know what's going on. Either way, the infection I noticed got a lump. Like, the spots on the back of my leg, the lump formed on the side of my leg. Fun times. I was a little worried because, again, we're talking about the big C, not
Corona,
but the other big C. So I ended up telling them when they went to go remove my stitches, I'm like, I think it's getting infected. Can you look at it? And so they prescribed some antibiotics for an infection because they're like, yeah, it might be getting a little infected. And so I told them about the lump, and they were just like, yeah, an infection. Turns out, the lump that formed was a blood clot formed by the infection. So I had a bad blood clot and no one noticed. So it got more painful and progressed to get a little more painful. Every time it would just kind of throb a bit, but nothing that I couldn't handle. Until one day where the pain got really bad because the lump shifted. The lump went from the side of my calf to where my ankle bone is. So the pain was on my ankle. So anytime I moved my ankle or took a step, I was in immense pain. I'm still in a lot of pain right now, but I'm doing a lot better than I was. The pain would go from the ankle to the bottom of the heel. So literally any pressure, any movement I did, I'm in pain. A lot of pain. So I got rushed to the hospital. Here's where the story really takes off. At the hospital, there's 4 people in front of me. There's literally when I get there, only 4 people in the waiting room aside from me. So altogether, there's 5 of us. Cool. I was like, okay, I'll be in and out of this, no problem. I'm used to New York hospitals where I go in at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm not getting out until 2 o'clock the afternoon 4 days from now.
What year is it?
And I was not admitted. I was just waiting for a doctor. So oh, this is nice, you know what I mean? So I go into triage relatively quickly, take some blood work and everything like that. And the lady that was doing my blood, she was really friendly, really sweet, but I don't necessarily think she knows what she was doing because she goes to stick the needle in and she can't find the vein. Fair enough. People got slippery veins. I get it. However, instead of pulling it out and being okay, let me try again here or something, she just went, inside me. Look what she did to me. Look at this. Look at this. Some kind of Rorschach test. Ooh, it kind of looks like a dinosaur like that. Like a dinosaur or a crab claw. It literally is a Rorschach test. But yeah, it looked a lot worse. It's been about a week since I was there, so it's dying down a bit, finally. So she did that, then she's like, I can't find it, but left the IV in me, and then she went to this arm, found the vein, no problem whatsoever. Cool! So I had 2 IV things in me at a time. They injected me with the saline, obviously, some antibiotics for the infection, and a couple other things. I was a concoction. Then as she's triaging me, I'm getting pulled to get x-ray done. So I'm like, okay, makes sense. They want to take an x-ray because they're like, oh, they don't know if it's actually the infection causing something or if it's like a break or a fracture. And I'm like, I definitely didn't break or fracture or anything, so I know can't be that, but I'll let them do it just to be on the safe side. We get to the thing. I'm like hobbling behind the dude. The dude sees that I cannot walk to save my life. He did not care. He didn't care at all. So I'm like hobbling along with like the IV like stripper pole just like dangling in front of me. And we get to the x-ray room, and again he sees that I'm in pain. This man has me stand against the wall to take an x-ray of my chest. Okay, so I asked him, I'm like, why are you taking an x-ray of my chest if my leg's the issue? And he's like, oh, literally like that. Oh. And I'm like, oh, what does that mean? But okay. And then he says, oh, you'll have to ask the doctor. Fair enough. Okay, fair enough. We're done with that. He takes the x-ray of my chest. We start walking back to the waiting room. A lady comes, follows behind us, and she's like, is this the guy I need? And I'm like, depends. Is the guy you need Santana? And she's like, yeah. So I'm like, that's me. And I'm like, where are we going? She's like, oh, all the way back that way, because it was a long walk from where they did the x-ray to the waiting room. So, and we were already by the waiting room. Like, we were already at the big doors that led to the waiting room. And she's like, all the way back that way. I'm like, oh, literally just like that. And I'm like, oh. But more pain because, again, I was in immense pain. Right now my leg is up, so I'm okay. But I was in a lot of pain. And so she's like, would it help if you had a wheelchair? I'm like, that would be amazing, honestly. The fact that so many people have seen me limp into this bitch in so much pain and no one offered that is bewildering to me. So she's like, okay, give me a second. She runs off, comes back. This is all I could find. I swear, when I tell you this wheelchair was falling apart, there was something very wrong with this wheelchair in every aspect of the word. To start off, the armrests, you know how the wheelchairs have like two armrests? Yeah, the one on the right didn't exist. She was just gone. Like, if I needed to do a quick escape, I could have just like,
Autobots, transform and roll out.
you know, I could have just like, Hoot! I would have been like, roll, roll, roll. Just go, 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 get out of here. And then the second thing was that it had one footrest. Place your bets on which footrest you think it was. Now, if you thought that the footrest was going to be on the side of the good foot, you'd be right. Because I did not have a footrest on the bad foot side. So what I had to do was I had to make do. I went to go cross my leg and they're like, don't do that. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. So I had to put my foot on the IV dangle pole. I'm not supposed to call it the stripper pole, honestly. I don't know what else to call it. I had to put my foot like on the wheels of the IV stripper pole so it can have something to rest on while we're like rolling along. She takes me back and they do an ultrasound of my leg. I was like, okay, that's weird, but okay. So I asked her, I'm like, okay, so what's going on? How's the baby? You know, I'm a little confused right now. And she says, oh, well, I can't say anything because I don't really know much. I just do the ultrasounds, see what I see from where I am, and then the doctor's gonna look. I'm like, okay, not a problem, I understand. Cool. They take me back to the waiting room. Everything's fine, except it's not, because I'm waiting, and 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 waiting. And I'm sitting there with these two open IV things dripping into my arms, and more and more people are coming in. And you don't want to be in a waiting room, especially in, you know, today's world. In the before 4 times, it wasn't as bad. But now, you know, anytime you hear someone go, you're like, why you coughing, friend? Why you coughing? I don't want that. Keep it away from me. I got the good vacuum, but I don't need that.
Corona.
Can you tell I love that video? Can you tell I love it? So, I'm just saying, and then all of a sudden, I notice that my IV isn't dripping anymore, and my blood is like going back into the tube instead of like juices flowing into me. So I'm trying to get someone's attention, no one's paying attention. My father has to go run over, get somebody for them to fix it. They come over and I don't listen. The lady was confused on how they did the IV because the IVs were just like tangled like vines around the IV pole thing. So she had to detangle me, and then to make sure that the juices were like flowing into me, since the tube that they used was so long for whatever reason, she had to like put it around my neck on both sides. She had to put this one going around that way so it could go down, and this one going around this way so it could go down. Either way, she was trying to choke me like you hate me but you love me, low-key wanna date me when you woo. Woo! So then I'm still there waiting. The juices are finally flowing. Luckily, I was talking to one of my friends at the time, and turns out that my other friend, her husband, was working at the hospital at the moment. So he stopped by, said hi. It turns out he was able to tell me that the reason that they did an x-ray on me is because when you go into, when you're getting an infection, they want to make sure you're not going septic. And when you go septic, apparently the best way to see if you're going septic is by doing an x-ray to check if there's any water around or in the lungs and any water forming around the heart. So that's why they did the x-ray. They really could have just told me that. But no, that's fine. It's fine. I'm fine. Can you tell how fine I am? So he leaves to go back to work, and I'm still there waiting, and waiting, and waiting. So eventually, we get fed up. My father goes and asks him, like, hey, what's going on with him? Like, do we have any information or anything like that? And she's like, give me a second, I'll check. This lady don't come back for an hour. She's gone for a full ass hour. Is she gone? No, because she keeps coming back out into the waiting room, but she's gone from me. Like, she will avoid eye contact at all cost. Which is a little bit of a red flag, but I'm like, say something. I'm giving up on you. By this point, everyone that was in there before me is gone. A few of the people that came in after me are gone, and I'm still there in the waiting room, just in a wheelchair, strapped into some IVs, plural. I hadn't eaten that day at all, and it was probably already like 8 o'clock at that point. So my father goes and picks up a snack. So he goes and picks up like a candy bar from the pharmacy outside. And while he's gone, that's when the lady decides to come by and literally do like a drive-by explanation. She's like, you're being admitted. I asked her as she's running past me, I'm like, does that mean I'm stuck staying here for the night? And she's like, already in a room, the door closes, she's like, uh-huh. And she's gone. I was like, okay. My dad gets back, and I'm like, so I think I'm getting admitted? And he's like, what makes you think that? I'm like, because a lady told me I was getting admitted, and I asked her if that meant that I was gonna have to stay here, and she said, uh-huh. So I think I'm getting admitted? So she came back, and my father's like, so what's happening? She's like, give me a minute. Again, another like 2 hours pass, and then all of a sudden, she comes back, and she's like grabbing the back of the wheelchair, and she's like, okay, we're going this way. And I'm thinking that means I'm gonna go get seen by a doctor, or I'm going to an actual room finally, or something. And so we're like, okay, so what's going on? And she's like, oh, I don't know anything. I can't tell you anything because I don't know anything. That's for your doctor and or nurse to tell you. So I'm like, okay, not a problem. I understand. Not everyone knows everyone's business in the hospital. Understandable. Except we go into the area that she's taking me to, which, by the way, is just a hallway. She took me into a hallway. We walked all of 50 feet, and she's like, oh, this is going to be your nurse. And she proceeds to tell the nurse what's going on with me. And this entire time, I'm looking at her, and I'm like, ain't this the bitch that just said she don't know anything?
I'm so damn confused.
And I'm like, okay, whatever. So when she leaves, I'm like, so what does that mean? And the nurse is like, oh, the doctor will have to tell you. I'm like, can you tell me anything? Because I literally have not been told anything this entire time. And she just told you something about me. She's like, he has this, and we're going to treat him for this, and he's going to be admitted, and we're going to do this and this. I'm like, So clearly you know something, which is a lot more than I do. But she said a lot of things that were like medical jargon and like nicknames for things like, oh, we're gonna do a thing for this and a thing for that. And of course the medical jargon and some letters like, oh, he has DVT and this. I'm like, so what does that mean? So I finally find out that I did in fact get an infection. The infection caused a blood clot, which unfortunately was a DVT blood clot, which is apparently one of the worst of the blood clots. Because it means deep vein thrombosis or thrombosis. I don't know, one of the two. I'm pretty sure it's thrombosis though. Don't quote me. I ain't no doctor. But that means that it's a deep vein blood clot. And unfortunately the deep vein that the clot decided to be in is an artery. Fun times. So I'm like, okay, cool, thanks for the information. Finally, I got something. You know what I mean? And so he's like, yeah, so we're gonna admit you, and we have to keep you under observation, and we're gonna give you some blood thinners and this and that. I'm like, okay, cool, thanks. He walks away. I'm left alone with my thoughts and my father. But it's getting late, and I'm gonna be admitted. So I tell my father, you know, go home, because he works the next day. And I'm like, you haven't eaten dinner. You went to work really early, so you've been up since like 4 o'clock this morning. You have to be exhausted at this point. Go home. You know what I mean? Get some sleep. At least one of us can. I'm not going anywhere, clearly. And so my father leaves, and I'm completely alone. So I'm there with my thoughts. I'm texting some people. It's okay. I'm not too stressed out or anything like that. Until, again, I'm in a hallway. And there are a few other patients in, like, seats near me. Like, they put me into a recliner seat while I waited for a bed. And so there was a few other patients in similar recliner seats that you can literally just roll away. And of course there's some patients in beds in the hallway too. And there's this one patient in the hallway in a bed, like 20 feet in front of me. Real, just a few steps. And all of a sudden, this man starts to die. I'm not laughing at his death. I'll explain in a second. All of a sudden we're all strapped up to monitors and stuff, and his monitors just start going crazy. And so all the doctors and like nurses come running around him, and everyone's like freaking out, and me and a girl next to me are just like staring at each other like, we hadn't even met yet. We just are in this similar situation where we're both stuck in a hospital at the moment, and there's like a man dying in front of us, you know what I mean? And so I'm just like, this isn't something you want to see, you know what I mean? This isn't something you want to see in a hospital. It's kind of like watching the Titanic on a cruise. You just don't do it. If you're stuck in a hospital, you don't watch someone die in a hospital. You just don't do these things. So I'm there watching this man die in front of me, and then all of a sudden, he stops. He just stops dying. He unplugs himself, gets up, and walks away. And I'm like, what? You don't do that. You don't just like, take 5 everybody, we're cool, I need a bathroom break, go get your smoke, go get a snack, we'll return to this in a minute. But take 5. You don't time out your death. So I'm just there bewildered, besotted, bamboozled, perplexed, every confusion, trying to figure out what just happened, because this man was dying 2 seconds ago, and now he's just walking past me like nothing's wrong in the world. So I'm still there, a few minutes later, confused, and then the man walks right back through like nothing again. He's walking with a doctor like they're buddy-buddy, like they might as well be just skipping down the hallway and shit. And so he gets back in his bed, and he still seems like everything's fine. Plugs himself back in. The doctor makes sure he plugged himself correctly. Everything's fine. All of a sudden, and everything goes back to panic mode. Doctors come running back, nurses come running back, and I'm like, this man really took 5 from his death. Like, he was like, time out! He got death, you know, just behind him, just like, oh man. Damn unions. Like, I don't know what the hell just happened, but this man literally was dying, stopped, went to take a pee break, and came back to die some more. He didn't die, at least not while I was there, but I'm still confused, okay? You can't blame me for being that confused about that. So finally, one by one people get taken away. It's finally my turn, you know, I'm just like,
I have been chosen. Farewell, my friends. I
gone to a better place.
That's la, just getting wheeled away. And so I get my room, and I'm like, oh my god, I got my own room. Oh my god, she's cute. It's a small room, you know, it might as well be Harry Potter's closet, but it's still my own. I'm away from all the infection, I'm away from all the other sickies. It's just me in here. Cool. And I have a bed now, I can probably get some sleep. So, of course, I'm in the hospital though, you know, I can't really fall asleep that easily. So I'm there watching The Simpsons, then I start watching Deadpool, well, Deadpool 2 to be exact. So I'm there for a bit, and I'm starting to drift off, like, near the end of Deadpool, and I'm just starting to drift off, and then all of a sudden, this nurse comes barging in, like the goddamn Kool-Aid Man, or like Bitch Puddin', and she's like, I'm here to stab your tummy, and I'm like, first of all, it is like 2 in the morning, bring that energy down. Secondly, excuse me? And she's like, I'm here to give you your blood thinners. And I'm like, okay, cool. But why do you need to stab my stomach? She's like, well, you see, that's just where we inject the blood thinners. And I'm like, okay, fine. She's like, what side do you want, left or right? And I'm like, doesn't matter. I would say this side because the other side was blocked by a table. So it made sense to go around the way that wasn't blocked by furniture. So she's like, oh, this is gonna hurt a little bit. I'm like, listen, I've already been stabbed twice today. I'm fine. Just do it. Get it over with. You know what I mean? And she stabs me. The stabbing doesn't hurt. Once she injects the juice, though, that's when I was like, this feels weird. There's something ain't right about this feeling. She, like, cleans up and goes to leave. She's like, all right, let me know if there's anything else you need. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, real quick. Is it supposed to burn? Because, you know, as somebody that's allergic to certain medications, you're always a little worried when a hospital injects you with something, because you're like, what if they forgot? Or what if this nurse doesn't know? You know what I mean? So, I'm like, is it supposed to burn? And she's like, yeah, it's supposed to burn. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So, this is fine. We're fine. And then it's like burning for a solid half an hour. Again, fine. Finally fades away. I'm starting to relax and get comfortable again. And a doctor finally comes in to see me. Not the doctor that I was told was going to see me, but a doctor. And he's like, so you want to go home? And I was looking at him like, can I? Like, asked him like, is it safe for me to go home? You know, a valid question, because I was told that I need to be held under observation. And he's like, yeah, it's safe for you to go home. But the way he said it was a little off. He's like, yeah, it's safe to go home. I'm like, you don't have to say that many times, but okay, I believe you. Don't gotta tell me twice. I want to go home. I want my own bed. So I tell him like, okay, yeah, sure. But can we wait a couple of hours? Because by this point, it's already like 3:30 in the morning, and I'm like, everyone's asleep. I ain't got a ride. And so he's like, yeah, not a problem. 15 minutes later, he's coming in with the paperwork. He's like, here you go, you're being discharged, this is what's going on, this is what's happening, you got the infection, you got a DVT, you're on blood thinners, I prescribed some more blood thinners, and I prescribed antibiotics for you, and you're good to go. And I'm like, okay, but I asked if we could wait a bit, and you said yeah. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, are you even paying attention to what I'm saying? Because it just seems like you're like, yeah. Like, when you're talking to somebody and they're like reading something, and you're like, oh yeah, this. And they're like, yeah, sure. Like, that's what it felt like. When they're not paying attention to you at all, and they're just saying yes to like shut you up. And so the nurse comes back in, and she's like, I guess you're being discharged? And I'm like, is that a bad thing? She's like, it's just, I'm not used to that for a DVT, but okay, sure. I asked him if it's safe. He said, yeah. And she's like, if he said it's safe, I guess it's safe. I guess? So she unhooks the IV from my arm, and she's like, all right, you're good to go. Have a nice day. I'm like, are you gonna unhook the other IV? And she's like, they had one in both. I'm like, how did you miss that? You're standing over it. But okay. I didn't tell her that. I'm just like thinking it real hard. But I'm like, yeah, they had me double-fisted IVs. And she's like, yeah, I see that. She unhooks me, and I asked her, I'm like, okay, so is there anywhere I could like hang out and relax and rest maybe a bit while I wait for someone to come pick me up? And she's like, yeah, the waiting room. That's a little disrespectful. Don't get me wrong. Like, I understand. But I'm still dealing with a medical situation. I'm still technically being seen by this hospital, like, don't throw me back into the waiting room because a doctor decided to discharge me after I told him I don't have anywhere to go. So I went to the waiting room and I waited for my ride. When my ride comes, my father's really confused on like why I'm being discharged. I explained everything to him and he's still a little bit confused on why I'm being discharged. And I understand. So later that day, we go pick up my meds and the blood thinners are so confusing. Like, so confusing. Like, the doctor told me to take them one way. The pill bottle tells you to take it a different way. The prescription slip that he gave me said to take it a different way. And the paperwork the doctor gave me said to take it a different way. 4 different ways! So, needless to say, again, I'm very confused. We're all debating on how to take it, and we're like, you know what, fine. Let's just call the primary doctor tomorrow. Because by this point, they got out of work when we were talking about it. Obviously, it's like already late afternoon, so by this point, the doctor's is already closed. So we're like, okay, we're gonna call the doctor tomorrow and figure out what's going on. How to take this medication correctly. Because I don't want to overdose and I don't want to underdose. Because a blood clot is apparently very serious. I should know. Everyone has told me multiple times that I can still die. They tell you that, like, if you abruptly stop taking the blood thinners, you can have a stroke or a heart attack and die. If you don't take enough, or you miss doses, you can get a stroke, a heart attack, or die. And even without anything, you can still get a stroke or heart attack or die. So either way, my health is shit right now. And I don't want to give it extra reasons to potentially heart a stroke and die. That's what I'm just going to call it now, heart a stroke and die. So I'm worried, and I don't want to overdose or underdose, so I took the minimal dose that I was told until we find out more. So we call the doctor the next day. The doctor asks, what is he doing home? Excuse me? Excuse me. What? They're like, yeah, no. Rush back to the hospital immediately because they were not supposed to let you go. So we rush back to the hospital. They're like, oh yeah, what seems to be the problem? I'm like, I was here on Monday night and I was told that I shouldn't have been discharged. And like, oh yeah, who told you that? I'm like, my primary doctor. Like, okay. I get triaged again, and the same lady was there. She's like, what are you doing back? She remembered me. And I was like, well, they admitted me, then they discharged me, but apparently they weren't supposed to discharge me after being admitted. And she like kind of laughing it off essentially, and everyone else I told was also kind of like being relatively rude about it and like laughing, like, yeah, sure, who told you that? I'm like, a doctor. My doctor. So then they quickly see me with an actual doctor this time, finally. Not that the other guy wasn't a doctor, it's just like I didn't see him until like 3 something, almost 4 o'clock in the morning. This time I saw a doctor like that. She explains everything to me. She's like, yeah, this is what's going on, this is your issue. I'm like, yeah, I already know that. And I'm like, how do I take the medication? And she explains how to take the medication correctly. And she's like, yeah, no, it's a new thing because of COVID that people with a DVT in your area, in the area that you have your DVT in, we can discharge on blood thinners and just tell them to keep close eye. And so she gives me a list of things to keep a close eye of, and I swear it's like the Gremlins thing. It's like, don't feed it after midnight, don't wet it, don't do this, don't do that. Like, it's weird things that I need to keep an eye out. Like, if the pain goes up, go see help. If I can't breathe or I'm short of breath, go see help. Which is a bit confusing considering that I have slight asthma. Like, I have my inhaler over there, and so I'm confused. I'm like, how do I know if it's just the asthma or the blood clot? I don't know. I don't know what I'm looking for. Like, if you have problems breathing, you get lightheaded, you get a funny headache. If your headache's feeling funny, if it's feeling strange, go see help. Just a list of things. And I'm like, sure, okay, cool, thanks. So that's where we are now. I am here trying to keep control, trying to keep composure of a blood clot and an infection in my leg. And I'm waiting for the medication to kind of kick in so that it's not hard and painful to actually walk and like move my leg yet, because it's still painful. So I'm waiting for it to kick in, so because they said it'll take about a week. We're at a week mark and it still hurts. I'm waiting for that, and then the issue with that is that by the time it wears off, like I have surgery next week, so I'll be able to walk for a couple days and then be out of commission for like a good month and a half. I'm too young for these medical issues. I'm too young for all of this. But yeah, that's where I am currently. In a lot of pain. I haven't been able to do anything. Like, I couldn't even clean up the room enough to do my usual story time setup, which is why we're here in this little corner. Hi. My usual, like, gaming setup. Hi, how are you? How are you doing? being told regularly that I can die at any given moment. I'm not worried. Are you worried? I'm not worried. I'm not worried. I'm not worried. I'm not worried. A little worried. I'm not worried. Not freaking out at all. I'm terrified. I'm fine. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this story time because it was oddly cathartic to get it off my chest. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and bing bong the ding dong down below to be alerted to whenever I can do a video. And until next time, bye!